Welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, coming to you from a series of very special editions over the next few weeks from the Saxon Hotel in Johannesburg, where not only am I surrounded by luxury, but also surrounded by some terrific winemakers. And the first of those we meet today is someone you've seen on the show before. Johann de Vet is the son of the man who brought Chardonnay to South Africa, and we'll find out exactly how just a little later. It's part of a Robertson Valley that has become synonymous with world-class, not just South African Chardonnay, but Chardonnay in general. So what makes the area quite so good? What allows their Chardonnay to really stand out? And why does Johann just love it so much? Let's find out. So as promised, my guest at the Saxon, one of many I'm seeing today and who you'll be seeing over the next few weeks, is someone who's been on Dan Really Likes Wine before. He's part of a family that pretty much wrote the book on Chardonnay in South Africa, and it's great to have you back, and warm welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. Nice to be in Joburg.
Now I have to apologise because the last time you were on the show, I thought I'd introduced you properly, the latest generation of this wonderful winemaking family carrying on the proud tradition, but I got shouted at by a guy called Benny from your head of global international relations, because apparently I was supposed to introduce you as the 2018 Western Cape Young Farmer of the Year.
Oh, it's in the past, so I think, rather focus on the current property and what we're doing.
I bring that up for a specific reason, because when we talk about winemaking, it's so important to remember that farming aspect of it. And I think it's all the more so with where you are, because your soils, your terroir, the limestone that we're going to speak about in a moment, that's where those grapes start. And that's really where this whole process gets started.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about site, and it's all about, the expression of that site in your wine. Just like some interesting experiments we're busy with fynbos in the vineyard as a permanent cover crop, and the growth we've seen from the roots, the much healthier soil. So really there's a lot of new exciting projects that we are busy with, vygies in the vineyards, so trying to work with indigenous cover crops and really do something special in our vineyard. So yeah, it's nice.
Of course, you've been doing special stuff in your vineyards for a long time now, and I think you're a terrific example of an area of South Africa that can make a whole pile of wine, and you certainly do, but there's one particular grape that you've really nailed your colours to the mast with. Give us an idea of just what it is about Robertson that screams out Chardonnay and makes it such a good home for the wine.
Yeah, if you look at Robertson today, it's the biggest Chardonnay producing area of the country. So it's 27% of all Chardonnay is planted in Robertson. It's also the biggest bubbly producing area, too, by default. But yeah, if you look at Robertson, high limestone soils, cool evenings, all these things lend itself to crisp acidities, wines with good pH balances, so chemistry-wise, stable wines, and that's really nice to have.
Two of which we're going to try in a moment, but two wines which we might not have had here at all had it not been for some creative approaches to the South African wine industry. I know we've told the story on the show before, but I do love it. Just get people who don't know the story into the history of it, how Chardonnay arrived in South Africa with a little help from your dad.
Yeah, well, my dad and a group of other friends and winemakers, and there was sanctions and a lot of red tape to get new varieties into the country or new clones into the country. So they kind of bypassed the regulations and took cuttings from a famous Chardonnay vineyard in France, in Burgundy, brought it back in a chocolate box. And so my dad got phoned and said, your chocolates has arrived. So yeah, planted the vineyard, and as I said, the rest is history. And today it's some of the best material we still have in the country.
It's wine that has its origins in France before it got happily kidnapped and brought to South Africa. Are we in a space now where South African Chardonnay, not just Robertson, but just generally South African Chardonnay, sits very much on its own feet and doesn't need to sit in comparison with French Chardonnay?
No, I think if you look at South African Chardonnay and where we are, it's in a very healthy position. It's if, from all the white wines exported, the highest rand per liter, return back to the farm. It's internationally wise, probably seen as the highest image varietal from South Africa, and really standing on its own. It doesn't, it's compared to Burgundy or America, but it's got its own personality already, and I think that's really important. So Chardonnay's leaps and bounds running ahead of the pack with just from a image perspective.
A lot of that personality comes from the terroir, and we've got a wine here which I've enjoyed rather a lot of over the years, and it really speaks to how the soil from which grapes emerge dictates what you're going to find in the glass. I was talking to Lionel from the Fledger a little while back, and he was talking about being told to lick the rocks and to lick the soil to get an understanding of what's in there. We won't do that today.
But not in Joburg.
but this translation of the limestone and how it finds its way into the glass, in very simple terms, how does that happen? How does it make this wine what it is?
Soil gives you the texture. If you look, give a good example, wines from clay soils will always have richer, more textured, more creamy characters. Not looking at winemaking geeky stuff like malolactic or take that out of the equation. And if you go to rocky soils again, it'll be more tight, more mineral driven, more lean, more one-dimensional. So it's really, you must say, this is the style of wine I want to make, or this is the soil I have, and what style do I want to make, and what complements it. But limestone throughout the world, if you go to Burgundy, America, New Zealand, everywhere where there's limestone, Chardonnay excels.
Well, let's see just how well this excels. It's probably 20 years since were you making this 20 years ago? When did the first limestone hill come out?
Yeah, it was probably, when was it, 90... late 90s.
So, right, so that would be about right. Okay. Oh. There are many reasons I love this. There are loads of great facets to it, but probably chief amongst them is this is the perfect Chardonnay to give to that person who fixes you in the eye and tells you that all Chardonnay is undrinkable. I'm never going to have a Chardonnay because 10 years ago, they had one Chardonnay that was full of wood and absolutely killed them. And this is so different. It's so fresh. It's so alive. Yeah. It's got the limestone obviously coming through, but it's a very different wine to the image of Chardonnay that some people sadly still have from years back.
Yeah, I mean, Chardonnay is definitely not that anymore. If you look at the whole drive has gone totally away from heavily wooded, overripe style of wines from the late or early 2000s. And yeah, this unoaked Chardonnay, so really it's a true fingerprint of that site where it's coming from. And there's no intervention with wood or any other external factors. So I think it's a true reflection of our property.
Before we try the other wine for comparison, just a final question on this. Given the terroir is so important and it screams that out in the name, to what extent can you direct this wine? And to what extent are the grapes, is the terroir telling you what's going to happen in this glass?
So Limestone Hill, or the vineyard, it's a couple of vineyards next to each other, and it's on a hill or on a ridge, and it's got it's clay-based top with limestone at the bottom, and the limestone will touch the surface and go down again, touch the surface, go down again. So it's difficult to manage when it's a young vineyard, but as soon as it starts to age, it really comes in its own. And when those roots all go into the limestone, and you get that beautiful chalky, salty minerality with grapefruit, citrus characters. And I think it's just a wine that goes so well with food. It drinks well on its own. It's a perfect all-rounder for any occasion.
We're going to bring you back to the food in a moment because food pairings and Chardonnay is such a cool space to discuss. But let's jump over to the other wine. We do have the second one, and this is a wine with a load of history. Answer three simple questions for me. What's the big difference between these two? What is the Batteleur Chardonnay? What's in here, and where does the name come from?
So Limestone Hill, as I said earlier, is a group of vineyards on a specific soil type and a specific area. So it's a snapshot of the area. Batteleur is a single vineyard. So here you really have a snapshot of one vineyard. And the vineyard, it's quite old. It's an old vineyard. It was planted in 1986. So the vineyard, throughout its history, always had a little bit of pear, citrus characters, nutty characters. So it stands up to oak quite easily. So this wine goes for 12 months into new barrels. But even though you've got the oak, which enhances the nuttiness, gives you a bit more complexity, more structure, the wine can stand up to it. You still have a lot of citrus, a lot of elegance, a lot of minerality. And that's something which becomes even more and more as they age.
It must say quite a lot about the wine and the nature of it that you can put it into new oak for 12 months and you don't get that chewy piece of wood that you might have got out of California years ago or even South Africa.
I think it's also to do with the selection of oak that you use. Just to put a wine in a barrel that's the simple part. It's really getting a barrel from that forest or that area of a forest. Is it the morning or the afternoon side of a tree? Because that all depends on how quickly the tree grew and the porousness of that the barrel. So all these things lend itself to the end product. And in the end of the day, this is what I have, and I need to complement it. So it's trying to find that magic to complement it.
Well, let's see if the magic is there. On past experience, it generally is. I'm full of questions today, some of which I think I know the answers to, but I want to check them anyway. The first of them is the aging. If white wine generally needs more time than we tend to give it in South Africa, we drink a lot of our wine too young. But given you've got that oak component, which isn't as overwhelming as you might think, 12 months in new oak, no, it's a really nice balance. But it's also, I'd imagine, got a long journey ahead of it.
I think yes, and to answer you, the unoaked wine as well. Because of the limestone soils, because of our cool evenings and all the effects that really gives us very stable chemistries, our wines all age very well. So you expect the oaked wine to age, better. But what I've been seeing is that the unoaked wines have really been the surprise, and they just keep going and going and going. So I'm really excited about unoaked Chardonnays that really just run for 20, 30 years, and that's fun.
That's brilliant. I'm looking forward to trying some of these in years to come, where I know we've had some very old wine of yours from the early days, but to see how they unfold over the years, it's such a fun part of it. It's also loads of fun, and we're going to be doing this shortly, trying all of this wine with different food, and the capacity that Chardonnay has to speak to all manner of different foods is a lot broader than people often imagine.
No, Chardonnay, to me, you can pair it with almost anything on earth. You really have to find a dish which Chardonnay doesn't complement. And it's for me, the easiest wine to pair.
I know there's a warm duck salad on the menu later. I think this is going to go rather nicely.
We'll see how that works.
The whole pile of them. We do have some food to get to, but just before we do that, you've got such an interesting and colourful history of the estate. You're doing more than just Chardonnay, certainly, but this is I think that very much the driver of who you are and where you are. What about going forward? What's exciting? What do we have to look forward to at Wetshof?
Well, my grandfather had mixed farming. My father started with moved over to only viticulture. Today, we focus more and more on Chardonnay. So I think it's really going to be honing those skills and finding what works, why it works, and really just focusing on those elements. And so which rootstock, which clonal material, why does it work? I think the exciting parts are still coming.
If there's something I can urge you to do, if you get down to Robertson as a whole, it's a wonderful place to explore from a wine perspective, full of gems, full of undiscovered wine estates for many, many people. But a visit to Wetshof in particular, line up the array of Chardonnay, and believe me, there's plenty of it. It's in a lovely location, it's full of great people, and it's a chance to see how this particular grape in South Africa and in the hands of people like Johann is leading the charge, is doing so well, and is introducing so many different styles of Chardonnay, but all of which are doing South Africa proud. Yeah, thank you.
Cheers. Thanks a lot, Dan.
To join the Pick and Pay Wine Club, simply SMS your smart shopper number to 36775. It's absolutely free, and you'll get for yourself 3 times the smart shopper points on every bottle of wine bought. You'll also get a 20% discount on 10 different wines each month, a 25% discount on a case of wine, and a Magnum, some terrific competitions and invitations to awesome events.